In this phase, you determine the basic information about your projects, the timeline, and the social map. Let's look at the project information. Here are some of the factors that can make or break a project. Especially when working with publishers, it is important to know how much time you have for drawing a project. But even without publishers, it is something you have to consider. Let's see the following situation. There's a convention next year. I know, as long as COVID is still rampant, it's unlikely, but let's talk hypothetically. Let's say there's a convention in 6 months and you want to create and sell your manga at the convention. Though more realistically it would be a one-shot, since there are very few people who can go through all the steps of the creation in half a year. So you have your start day and your final deadline. But I wouldn't recommend to set your deadline at the convention time. Give yourself at least a few weeks of buffer time, or even better, a 2-month buffer time. A lot of things can happen, so calculating in additional time is very important. In fact, a lot of publishers I know calculate months of buffer time or wait with the announcement of a project till it's completely finished. There are just too many things that can go wrong and cause a delay or even a cancellation. Next, there's the question of the length. In my opinion, this is one of the most important questions. One of the most common rookie mistakes is being too ambitious and going for a project that is just too big and would take a decade or more to complete on the first try. I would suggest starting with something smaller, something that you can manage. Think about how many pages, chapters, or volumes your project is going to have. For reference, I have seen one-shots for up to 56 pages. A volume can have between 160 and 200 pages. As for volumes, there's no limit, but I really wouldn't recommend to go over one volume on the first try. From what I have seen, even full-time artists spend at least a year on one volume when they work without assistance. And those people are with experience in finishing projects. So it is really an important question to consider. How much time do you want to invest into this project? And the time is determined by the length of the project and your drawing speed. And of course other factors like your health, other responsibilities, and your goals. Next come the questions of genre and target audience. What niche are you targeting and who are you drawing for? Different type of manga require different approaches as to different audiences, so it's important to think about. Then comes the question of the publication format. Is the project going to be printed or is it going to be online? It is important to think about because certain types of online publication are difficult to print and need adjustment. I'm talking about forms like endless canvas or colored versions. When you print your manga yourself, you have to consider things like printing cost, and colored manga is more expensive to print, unless you target both media directly and make sure that the pages can be adapted both for print and for internet. The next question is about the medium of creation. Are you working with traditional media, digital, or a mix of both? If you're working with traditional media, you have to make sure that you have a good scanner. And especially when working with screen tones, you have to make sure that your scanner can remove moire. It's a pattern that some scanners cause when the scanner fails to recognize each dot in the screen tone. It looks like a type of checkered pattern. Though nowadays people mostly use digital screen tones, so it's less of a problem. Just make sure not to stack dot screen tones on top of each other, because this can cause moire to appear digital as well. Next comes the question about the production specifics. Let's say you want to use a certain printing company for your manga. They usually have measurements and format requirements on their websites, which is best to follow so that there are no issues when you want to print your manga. They also provide templates. Different printing companies may have different requirements, so it is important to keep them in mind from the beginning. Or your publisher expects you to deliver your pages with certain measurements and with certain file formats. Same story. Work with them from the beginning. It will save you panic sessions later on. If you don't have a publisher yet, but plan to approach publishers, it is good to have a list of the publishers who already have projects in the same niche that you are targeting. Oftentimes, publishers refuse a project because they feel that the project is not for them, because it's in the wrong niche. They know their audience and know what their audience will expect from them. And since they are typically risk averse, they go with what they know and what sells for them. If you are intending to publish your manga online, unless you publish on your own website, it is good to do your homework and check out which websites are around and what requirements they have. Also, take time to read the terms of services. Next comes the question of research. Unless it's something fictional or that you are familiar with, a story usually requires some research. It might involve the research of a geographic location, of history, of culture, or of some sort of specific topic. Putting it on the to-do list early on is a good idea. And last but not least, is the question of languages. If you intend to publish your project in more than one language, it is good to keep in mind, especially with web publications that may involve different online platforms. These are at least the basic points to address at the start of the planning, but there are other things to keep in mind, like the timeline. I'm not talking about the time you need to do your projects. Rather, I'm talking about in what time frame your story is taking place. I would suggest to do the step in tandem with the writing process, which is phase 2. But you already can make plans. For instance, this is a system that I use to keep an overview of the scenes that happen in a certain chapter and attach them to a time frame. Let's say your story, or at least chapter 1, takes place around the time of March till July of 2019. The first scene starts in May of 2019. The next scene progresses to the end of May and to the beginning of June. Scene 3 happens at the end of June and the beginning of July, while scene 4 is a flashback that addresses a situation which happened in March. Scene 5 continues time-wise where scene 3 has left off and progresses to the middle of July. The timing here is arbitrary. You can adjust the time frame from chapter to chapter and do it in years or even times of day. It's just to keep a track of the scenes that happen in each chapter and even volume. I will provide the template as well as the other files as a PowerPoint file that you can adjust to your needs. The next thing to address is the social map. It involves the relationships between the characters. Who is your main character and what relationships does he or she have with other characters? Will the relationship change in the story? Can friends become enemies and enemies become friends? Will a hero go bad or vice versa? Especially with stories that involve a lot of characters, it is good to help yourself keep track of their relationships, not only of main characters but also of side characters. People are moved by different personal motivations, and a personal motivation of a side character might provide the key to solving an issue that the main character is facing. So think about it. I would suggest to draw your social map while you are writing a story.